Following the recent general election, Parliament is set to hold the first vote for Parliament Speaker on Tuesday, with the candidates of the Nationalist and pro-Kurdish parties having also completed on Monday their rounds of visits to party leaders in order to seek support in the race. The need to increase the prestige of Parliament was a major theme in statements made by opposition candidates for Speaker of Parliament following their visits to party leaders. After meeting with Ahmet Davutoğlu, leader of the ruling Justice and Development Party, AK Party, Ekmeleddin İhsanoğlu, nominee for the Speaker's post from the Nationalist Movement Party, MHP, underlined that Parliament should be restructured to increase its prestige in the eyes of the public. İhsanoğlu's meeting with acting Prime Minister Davutoğlu lasted about 20 minutes, which is in sharp contrast to the mere 4 minutes MHP leader Devlet Bahçeli allocated for the AK Party's candidate for Speaker of Parliament when he paid Bahçeli a visit last week. In remarks to reporters following his meeting at the AK Party headquarters, İhsanoğlu said, "The executive should be under the supervision of Parliament rather than Parliament being subject to it." During the almost 13-year AK Party rule, Parliament failed to properly supervise the government, as it usually rubber-stamped all bills presented by the government as a result of the ruling party's substantial majority. İhsanoğlu's remarks also revealed that the MHP favors election of a parliament speaker through consensus. Noting that the general election results, based on which no single party managed to win a parliamentary majority to form a government, call for consensus among the parties, the MHP candidate said Parliament is the first place where consensus needs to be achieved. Following his meeting with Davutoğlu, İhsanoğlu paid a visit to Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, leader of the main opposition Republican People's Party, CHP, at the CHP headquarters. The MHP candidate did not pay any visit to the pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party, HDP, as his party refuses to have any sort of dialogue with the HDP, accusing it of being closely affiliated with the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party, PKK. The PKK is recognized as a terrorist organization by Turkey, the US and the EU. CHP Deputy Chairman Haluk Koc and Tekin Bingöl were also present when İhsanoğlu was received by the CHP leader. İhsanoğlu, who previously headed the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, ran for president last year against the AK Party's Recep Tayyip Erdoğan as the joint candidate of all the opposition parties except the HDP. The Speaker is elected by secret ballot and a supermajority of 367 votes is required for a candidate to be elected in the first 2 rounds of voting. However, none of the candidates is expected to secure the support of 367 deputies in the first 2 votes as the parties are expected to support their own candidates. In the third round of voting, which is to take place on Wednesday, candidates need an absolute majority to be elected, that is, the votes of at least 276 deputies in a 550-member parliament. HDP candidate Dengir Mir Mehmet Fırat has expressed frustration with the MHP's attitude toward the HDP, saying it is impossible to figure the MHP out. In remarks to reporters following a meeting with Davutoğlu, the HDP's Fırat underlined that the votes the HDP received in the election are as legitimate as those received by the MHP. The MHP will have to come to terms with the fact that the HDP has as many seats in parliament as the MHP, Fırat added. Obviously discouraged by the MHP's rejection, Fırat is not scheduled to visit MHP headquarters for talks. Fırat, according to whom the Speaker of Parliament could be elected in the third round of voting, also said he had told Davutoğlu that the prestige of Parliament vis-a-vis the executive needs to be elevated. Fırat also met with CHP leader Kılıçdaroğlu. Candidates from the AK Party and the CHP for the Speaker's role, Defense Minister Smit Yilmaz and Deniz Baykal respectively, already completed their visits to party leaders last week. The candidate to be elected as Speaker of Parliament may well give a clue as to which parties may join forces to forge a coalition government. Although the ruling AK Party lost its parliamentary majority for the first time since it came to power in 2002, and still the most deputies in parliament, the 3 other parties can have a candidate elected if they jointly offer support for a single candidate. The election of an opposition candidate would mean the end of the AK Party's domination over parliament, as it is, up to a certain extent, up to the head of parliament to organize parliament's schedule. Remarks by some opposition representatives imply they would be ready for such cooperation. We would not like to elect a Speaker of Parliament from the AKP, the opposition's version of saying AK Party, just as we will not forge a coalition government with the AKP, said HDP-CO Chair Ertuğrul Kürkçü on Monday. There are rumors circulating that some 60 AK Party deputies could vote for the HDP candidate in the third round of voting to carry the HDP candidate into the final round of voting together with its own. In response to a question about the rumor, Kürkçü said at a press meeting in Parliament that such a step would mean getting involved in intrigues, which is something Parliament should not be identified with. Describing such an act as a political crime, Kürkçü added, that is not just, honest, or ethical. In the June 7 election, in which no single party managed to obtain 276 seats, a parliamentary majority, the ruling AK Party took 258 seats, while the CHP took 132 seats. The MHP and the HDP, the two other opposition parties represented in Parliament, each have 80 seats. As the deputy figures reveal, should some 60 AK Party deputies vote for the HDP candidate in the third round, and if all the other deputies were to vote for their party's candidates, the AK Party and HDP candidates would be entitled to run in the final round. As the MHP is not expected to vote for the HDP candidate, the AK Party's Yilmaz would likely emerge victorious in such a scenario. In contrast, should the CHP's candidate appear in the final round, he could get the support of all the opposition parties and be elected Speaker. The MHP's Semih Yalın, who is deputy chairman, has also implied that his party would be inclined to support an opposition candidate in the race. In an interview with the Bugün Daily on Monday, Yalın said, in response to a question about whether the MHP candidate had any chance of winning the race since the party has only 80 deputies in Parliament, the MHP deputy chairman said, I believe it is the AK Party's Semih Yilmaz who has less chance of winning. The election of the Speaker could also be a road marker for the shape of the coalition government to be formed, depending on the potential cooperation between the parties. Yalın affirmed in the interview that his party would vote for its own candidate in the first two rounds, then decide how to act in the following rounds based on the developing circumstances. Should no candidate get 276 votes in the third round of voting, a final fourth round will be held on Wednesday, in which the two candidates who had the most votes in the third round will compete. The one who then gets a simple majority of the votes in the final round will be elected Speaker. The CHP's Baykal, who currently serves as interim parliamentary Speaker, as he is the oldest member of Parliament, seems to be the most likely candidate to get the opposition's support in such a scenario. Baykal clarified on Monday questions as to whether it would be legal for him, as interim Speaker, to head the voting sessions in Parliament, since he is also one of the candidates in the race. During a press meeting in Antalya, Baykal said he would head the voting sessions, but that he would not vote, although there is no binding rule that bans the interim Speaker from voting. Noting that there is no law or Parliament bylaw that says the acting Speaker may or may not head a voting session in such circumstances, Baykal said, there seems to be no problem either legally or politically. Elaborating on if abstaining from voting would constitute unfair competition for himself, since the other candidates will be voting for themselves, Baykal said he is not willing to give up the honor of heading such an important session for the sake of voting for himself. He would not care even if he should lose by a single vote, Baykal added. The AK Party's candidate, Yilmaz, is in sharp contrast, participating in the race without resigning from his post of Defense Minister. Levent Gök, parliamentary group deputy chairman of the CHP, has called on Yilmaz to resign, arguing that Yilmaz's position is not in accordance with either democratic practices or political ethics. Noting that Yilmaz is a member of the executive, Gök said, in a press meeting in Parliament, that the AK Party candidate should resign from his post for the sake of political ethics, although there is no rule which obliges Yilmaz to take such a step.